Inside her. When the fire reached her, she exploded. All knowledge gushed from her, was scattered everywhere. How did he and Javier think of having this be the beginning of the book? The end of a world as we knew it, and the beginning of the world we're going to know from now on. Kumeyaay, Indian creation narrative. That's probably not the right pronunciation. Since we only have just a few minutes per person, and I don't want to bypass my time, I will just read one thing that connected me and Jerry in a deep, deep sense. On a given day when my life had been torn apart into pieces, Jerry proposed, why don't we do a tour, a performance tour of South America? And of course I said, okay, let's do it. Next day, it was organized, self-organized, not by me, but by the poets in South America that heard of this idea. And so I said, why don't we begin our performance tour at the Bowery Poetry Club? Is Bob Holman here? Ah, good. So you see, you are woven into this story too. So that was the first night when we were at the Bowery Poetry Club that Jerry heard that I had translated a poem of 20 cantos that he had translated. I said it like a few minutes before we began. He said, what are we going to read? And I say, how about this? And the poem was the yaqui flower, the 15 flower world variations, which when I researched turned out to be 20. He left out 5. So I translated all of them. And when I began studying, I learned something so beautiful, which is exactly like what you were saying, Ariel, that the way he proceeded with Yiddish, which touched me deeply because he was translating Yaqui, a language he didn't know. So I went to find the original, and the original actually didn't quite exist. It was a literal transcription by an anthropologist of a language that the anthropologist clearly didn't quite understand. So from that, Jerry composed a poem that is such a masterpiece that when I read it, I instantly translated the whole canto from beginning to end. So this, I will not have time to read you my transcription of his reading, but I will pay homage to this poem that he created out of nowhere about the fragrance of the poem he didn't know the language of, but he did. Canción del hombre muerto. This is falling apart like me. Okay, I will hold it like that. Okay. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. Out in the flower world, the dawn over a road of flowers. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. So this mysterious poem is sung from the perspective of the man that is buried under the earth and is feeling the roots of the flowers springing from his body up into the sun. These flowers are the poems, the poets being born out of us being dead. Jerry, you are spawning the flowers of the future. Thank you.
With that little performance and Matthew's and Ariel's, it's sort of like having different parts of Jerry's soul in the room walking around. I mean, it's kind of eerie. I see so much of Diane and Jerry and you when you're performing, when you're there. It's quite eerie, actually. I know it's all genetics, but no, it's more than that. No, Jerry was my initiator into the alternative poetry world at Le Metro Cafe when I was 22 years old. It was Ed Sanders. He was my student colleague at NYU. And together, these folks turned my brain around. And I'm very grateful to them for that. "12 years ago, when Jerry was just turning 80, I proposed an addition to his already unwieldy, hyphenated identity as critic, anthropologist, editor, anthologist, performer, teacher, translator, namely, that it should end with American prophet. It would mean that what must be done for any authentic act of prophecy, especially poetic prophecy, is to inflect further the meaning of the prophetic. As we learned when we spent more than 40 hours a year in 1972 editing the anthology, America, a Prophecy, a new reading of American poetry from pre-Columbian times to the present. A deep lesson learned from William Blake, as the title suggests, is that poetic prophecy doesn't predict the future. It creates new levels of possibility that open in further acts of mind, visionary acts, and actions that happen inside language and teach poesis what it can be now. When that happens, it becomes the future, lived consciously in the present. That Jerry did just that. In more ways than even extended hyphenation can begin to suggest, it's clear when we realize how deeply his presence is felt now. Losing Jerry was like losing a limb for some of us. And not only the kind and generous person, the beautiful being, the eternal collaborator, exciting, strange poetries to show us their secret workings. But something is felt inside how we think, read, and write. His broad spectrum anthologies were not collections of best poems. They worked in different modalities, but they are poetic acts that connect us to the powers of language, hidden or sleeping in other cultural ecologies, not exploitative appropriations, but marriages of poetic minds, allowing us to recognize in our own possibilities through the gifts of the radically other. He was the prophet of an America that began with Whitman to see itself beyond itself, while still always its actual self. And yet, even now, is still largely invisible to itself, as we are tragically learning in the present. Jerry's life process was working passionately inside language, sustaining an emergent vision of the powers of a self-renewing linguality, a quite heroic commitment. That vision against the disaster of human presence on planet Earth. To read him now, to hear him, as we just heard him inside these great performances, is to inherit a vision and a vitality, a path with an inside chance of sustaining the possibility, even now, in the new darkening. Thank you. Welcome, Amish Trivedi.
Thank you. I want to say thanks to Pierre, who actually put me in touch with Jerry so many years ago, so thank you for that. And two, thanks to Jerry, I always teased him that I got into a bunch of cool rooms because of him that I never belonged in to begin with, and he's still doing it, so thank you. But I was going through my own stack of thousands of emails from Jerry, and wondering why the Jacket 2 post was not posted on time. I am sorry to all of you. I failed over the years, regardless. And I found notes of his from my last book, which he read after it came out. And he said it's very good, but it doesn't really pick up until page 87. So I thought I would read you starting at page 87. The side of the road swallows an ascent, a mountain of no summits. The disease we call capital is what you ran over, why the glass has cracked around you. Take all the idle hands and section them from their wrists so they can shape no more, carve no more designs into this tomb. There is no signal that reminds the air to burn off, no gesture that indicates an understanding of why these things happen. Bring the whole thing down and scatter the ashes into the rivers of solar rays that have been walking all along, attempting to signal that we are not here forever. It's not that hard, really. If I pulled the pin on the grenade, I'd be the only one damaged. My time placed into time. History repeats itself because we do not hear the echo through the cave of time. What reverberates, overwhelms, and histories cannot be heard because time dilates, swerves to miss us. History decays into mythology as we cannot hear the near blasts of time shifting the earth off its axis. The future, a siren, a song, a tying to the mast, a crashing against the rocks, the waves. My panic is that we cannot imagine a future until we revise the past, the clanking replicator endlessly rebuilding itself and perpetuating across the abyss of time for a future that belongs to no one. Time causes history to swell and burst and heal, and swell and burst and heal. The rupture disrupts for a moment the linearity of time, the stopgap pressure points of the seconds that play into our blindness of time. History fragments, spreading around time as it consumes all the resources of time, the past to build a future. Thank you. And you said Anne's not here, so Barbara Einzig.
Hello, good to see so many old and new faces. I was quite stricken to learn of Jerry's passing. As someone just said, like, I pretty much think of him every single day, and I keep thinking, I'm get out and see Jerry and Diane, but the pandemic started very cruelly for me in California, and I haven't been out since and missed seeing him at a translation conference he was at Stanford right then. It was like I had to get back before things shut down. So this is a kind of meditation of the shape-shifting of Jerry. In March, as I was coming back from in Brooklyn, in a dream, I was in an old house in San Diego. From the second story, I heard your voice conversing. Jerry? Jerry Rothenberg? But the voice changed to that of any man. What? That is not me. With a chant by myself, by my own power, I have been chanted here. With a tale by myself, I have been told here. I have conjured myself up here. You appeared at UC San Diego in the early 70s, and Ed Friedman told me, you have to take his class. It was in translation, and you asked if I would translate something from the Russian volume of shamanic chants gathered by Vladimir Bogoros. There were 10 volumes in German you had found while working on Technicians of the Sacred. This incantation came out of that translation of an incantation used in hunting wild reindeer, told to Bogoros by Nikon Taratirgan in 1900. I call all game, every living thing, from the edge of where things start. I sing, so, who are you? I use the distance of yesterday. I use the distance of today. I make them appear before me. I cover my face with soot. To every kind of animal, I become unknown. To every species, I become unrecognizable. Only the soot of my face appears before their eyes. So Jerry opened a door for me, and I got in, but I never really got out. And I feel that there have been many circuitous journeys, and that my hope is to continue to realize many of those gifts that he opened to me. So these traditions are from Chukchi, which is a culture up by the Bering Straits, sited right in the area that we must protect from drilling. Jekulilinen, it has its own voice. Shamanism, divining and curing through the voice and drum as vehicle. From the Chukchi viewpoint, language and breath are vehicles of exchange between the human and non-human realms. Ventriloquism, identities often loaned or borrowed. Bogoros said that the shamans among the Chukchi with whom I conversed were, as a rule, extremely excitable, almost hysterical, and not a few of them were half crazy. Their cunning is the use of deceit in their art, closely resembled the cunning of a lunatic. This shaman, Nikon, was a reindeer Chukchi. His shamanistic call occurred during his search for the herd that had run away in a thick fog. The search went on for months, and during this time he was often without food or shelter. He met, according to his account, several animals who acted like men and played various tricks on him. At last he met a wolf who was eating a newly killed reindeer. a little diversion, I recently looked with my daughter and my grandson for a wolf in Queens, in the woods. That was our purpose. We did not find the wolf. The wolf pitied him in his hunger and told Nikon to cut off the legs and eat the bone marrow. But the reindeer begged Nikon not to touch it, promising to bring the herd as ransom. The wolf sneered, saying that the reindeer was too slow since it had allowed itself to be caught. Then Nikon ate from the reindeer. The wolf promised to find the herd. After 2 weeks, he again met Nikon and told him where to find the reindeer. And that was his calling to become a shaman. So I spent a lot of wonderful time with Jerry, Diane, and Matthew in Milwaukee years ago, working as his assistant on the big Jewish book, when he was startled to find out that this California girl from UCSD knew various verses of A Koishain Begelach. And my mother was horrified when she received a big Jewish book, because the story that Jerry had unearthed about it was that it was a song sung by prostitutes. A Koishain Begelach, come find my Begelach, my pretty little Begelach, So she said, oh, it's so disgusting. I never would have sung him all the verses. But anyway, according to my mother, there were no Jewish alcoholics or etc. So, and it turned out, in fact, that Vladimir Bogoros was born in 1865 in the Ukraine as Nathan Mendelyevich before he was baptized and renamed in his early 20s. So I just wanted to close with reading one not too long translation from a different shaman, the shaman Caraway. And this is a story of what happened to him. And a lot of it is based in history. And I did feel Jerry, the only person that I heard him speak poorly of was Stalin. And I wanted to be able to finish my new translation of, Mandelstam's Stalin poem, but anyway, okay, so this is Things Seen by the Shaman Caraway. I slept and my souls went away. They set out for way up there to look at, to visit sun, dawn, and creator. On the road, they said to me, what's this slow movement of yours? Take our harnesses. Dawn and sun spoke to me in that way. Dawn said, I'll go with you. It's good for me to go with the drum when I'm in between both of you, keeping up with the drum. Those souls went under the earth and no longer came back, even though I called them back. When they started walking, they were walking on the earth and under the earth. They were seeing everything above the earth and in the high places. They didn't want to come back, no matter how much I called them back from there. But in this summer, I was with the herd and I fell asleep in front of the herd. 2 came on reindeer, the bedding of their sledges worn from traveling so long. The hooves of the deer were ground down from galloping. I looked at them and my mind got confused. My body weakened and became like water. I was turned from a strong one into a weak one, fond of sleep, hardly walking in daylight. To my herd were born such reindeer as in the harness of those people. A wild buck came to the herd, turned tame and quiet, and sired children of his same color, these reindeer of my neighbors, my own. On the river's steep bank, there lives a person. A voice there exists and speaks. I saw the master of this voice and spoke with him. He submitted to my power, bent down and sacrificed to me. He arrived yesterday. Small gray bird with the blue breast, who shamanizes sitting in the hollow of the tree and calls the spirits, arrives and answers my question. Woodpecker strikes his drum in the tree with his drumming bill. Under the blows of the axe, the tree trembles and wails like a drum under the drumstick. It was my helping spirit. It arrives, and I hold it in my hands. My souls are flying like birds in all directions, observing everything there is at once and bringing news to my breast like food to the nest. It's good for me to fly with my souls and the round canoe. My friend, not far from here, I saw that from the river Oloi, a great storm's advancing, and it hits everything. Between the tents, a river was flowing, full of blood. Soon we'll hear news of murder. I heard how Creator was angry that we, the inhabitants of this country, are paying tribute to the Russians. Papers of mixed up colors that we receive in exchange for different skins are accepting foreign signs, and because of this, he makes the pasture of the deer deteriorate and creates limping mothers and young calves. Children and serves as a helping spirit. Skins lying in bags as stock for trade are having conversations through the night. Antlers on the graves of the dead are walking in procession around the graves, and in the morning they're coming back to their former places, and the dead themselves are getting up and coming to the living. Thank you very much.
Somewhere out there, I hope, is the black bag that I walked in here with. My books in it. Could you just look around? It was around in this area, and it had look, it's okay if it's not found, because of course everything is on my telephone. But it's a black bag. A black bag. Well, that's it. Oh boy. Pretty good. How good. Thank you. Pretty Jerry. So I bring greetings from Charlie Marmer from
Finland, and I'm working with Charlie these days. It was Technicians of the Sacred that opened up the unwritten history of orality. Yes, I'm now giving away the whole poem, damn it. But when I taught the poetry of endangered languages at Columbia, the only textbook that I could find was Technicians of the Sacred, written 50 years before the class. Allen Ginsberg once said about Jerry that he saved us 20 years. That's something. All right, let's see if I can find this. Oh, I'm sorry, it was more than 20 years. Sure, let's have that footnote here. Okay, maybe I'll have to read this from the phone. Let's see. Yes, when we were doing the People's Poetry Gathering, and Jerry was consulting, we had to, oh, here it is, had to come up with a catchphrase for the People's Poetry Gathering, which brought together oral poets and text poets and everything in between. And Jerry said, well, this will be the Woodstock for poets. So there we have it. And this is a praise poem that I wrote for Jerome Rothenberg's birthday party / action poetry event at the Kitchen on 3/31/01. I don't know, how old, has anybody got good at subtraction here? Oh, coincidence that we needed a party, they say it's your birthday. We praise the hairs of your chinny chin chin, Jerry, Jer, home, foam, loam, dome, Jerome, You who woke up the world by gentle beetle breaths just off the edge of the page. You who shook the pump till the kin flowed out, and now we ken all your kin. Children of the Rothenberg, all praise ye now. To now, speaking of which, Alcheringa, New Wilderness, Lorca, Dada, Poland, and the game of silence of prophecy, Corbin, big Jewish tongue Hawkswell, in no particular. Yes, we ethnopoetics. We ethnopoetics today. Schwitter's millennium, yes, but which is both, and all we can say is give Jerry more birthdays. Come to pray, say Jerome Rothenberg, poet. Hey, he's the one now, 82 in 1-3. Okay, 82. Dial his number. He will hold you on hold, forever. His style, hello, Diane. And of course, Charlie the music, Jerry the throat, Jerry the larynx, Jerry the teeth, the lips, Jerry the breath, Jerry the wind piping, yuppie, sound the unsound sound, the unsuspected diddy-boom la da da wah sound of the P-O-P-Pi-Po-Pi. It's by you, oh, by you, praise, love, the raise, the praise, the dearly beloved in every which all directions strange way, Jerome Rothenberg, jajer, we do to you. He who wrote down the oral tradition without killing it. Jerry, Jerome Rothenberg, all praise to you. Okay. And now another great inspirer to step up. Please, Mimi Gross.
Bob, you're a hard act to follow. Oops. Uh-oh, just broke it. Thank you. Well, a lot has been already said that I would say the same thing. To have met Jerry was as if you always knew him and always would know him. He just walked into your heart. And we had an amazing thing in common, that we were the same size. So I could look right into his eyes, right into mine, and it was forever. And this is the same with Diane, because she's the same size. I mean, for me, it reminded me of my father's studio, where the old Yiddishkeit literary characters would smoke and talk while my father would chip, chip, chip at his sculpture. But then Jerry was a younger generation, and he was inspired by something so much larger than that immediate community, and he did it. When I was still quite young and techniques of the sacred, it just changed my life completely. And so I'm going to read a little quote from his preface from 1967. Poet and man, man and world, world and image, image and word, word and music, music and dance, dance and dancer, dancer and man, man and world. Then I'd like to read a short homage, because Jerry introduced us to world poetry, and in the midst of it was Wang Wei, one of my favorites. With age, I am growing too lazy to write verses, and now old age is my only company. In a fast life, I was mistakenly as a poet. Former existence, I must have been a painter, unable to throw off my remnant habits, I find the world has come to know me for them. My name and style, these they have right. But this heart of mine, they still do not know. And because we're now in a new world of future darkness, I'd like to read from Techniques of the Sacred. As the sun makes it new, day by day, make it new, and yet again, make it new.
Speaks so well of Jerry and his soul to bring all of us together tonight. And really, I'm just so moved to be here. And my first Wednesday night reading at the church was right in this spot, because I think back then it was 1975, and they had, this is where the podium was. It wasn't up at the head down there. It was right here. And it was with Jerry. And I was verklempt. And anyway, like many of you, I discovered really who I was as a poet through Technicians of the Sacred. And this is my original edition when I bought in San Francisco when I was out there in 1970. And I'd already been in the city, and I'd been following the poetry scene in the city. I knew I wasn't a quote-unquote New York poet, and I wasn't a beat. I didn't know who I was. And I read this introduction at one point. I just stopped and just, you know, I couldn't believe it. He was speaking directly to me. He's telling me who I am. So I just want to read a little bit from that I've circled all these many years. This is from the introduction. He's talking about the animal body rootedness of quote-unquote primitive poetry, but I think it applies to all poetry. Recognition of a physical basis for the poem within a man's body, or as an act of body and mind together, breath and or spirit. In many cases, too, the direct and open handling of sexual imagery, and in the events of sexual activities as key factors in creation of the sacred. And yes, all that. And then here on the right column, he lists what would be, how this would be relevant in contemporary expressions of poetry. Then Dada, beat language, line of breath, you know, projective verse, sexual revolution, Rimbaud's Voyant, Rilke's Angel, Lorca's Duende. This is, oh, and psychedelic seeings and beings. Yeah. My nephew brought me down today from upstate, and I was telling him about all the times I saw the Grateful Dead back then on acid, you know. So I'm just going to read a couple of little poems that particularly speak to me from this anthology, and then I'll read something of my own from back then, when I was heavily influenced by this wonderful, wonderful book. And let me just say, Jerry invited me to a party after that reading, and we were friends throughout his life. And whenever he was in the city, you know, he made a point, when I still lived in the city, of getting in touch, and just a wonderful man. And not too long ago, when I knew this reading was coming up, and Matthew, thank you for inviting me, I had a dream of Jerry and I dancing. And it was just so neat, you know, it was just a waltz or something like that. But it was just really touching. So I just, for whatever reason, I respond to a lot of the poems that are of Native American heritage. So this is The Stars. For we are the stars, for we sing with our light, for we are the birds made of fire, for we spread our wings over the sky, our light is a voice, we cut a road for the soul, for its journey through death. For 3 of our number are hunters, for these 3 hunt a bear, for there never yet was a time when these 3 didn't hunt. For we face the hills with scorn. This is the song of the stars. And one other little one here. This is Papago Indian. The other one, I can hardly pronounce this, is Passamaquoddy. And it's that part of northern Maine and Canada, in Quebec. And there's a reservation up there, and Robbie Robertson of the band, who is part Native American, he spent his youth there. So this is a Papago Indian poem called Death Song. In the great night, my heart will go out. Toward me, the darkness comes rattling. In the great night, my heart will go out. Okay. And we will all be joined together at that juncture. Now, I have a book here. Oh, yes. Yes. So, this was back in the day, around the time of this, a very early poem, and it's called Belladonna. Okay, here we go. Let's do this here. Who is it wants me? Who makes the animal noise? Who walks barefoot while I'm sleepless? Those bare feet, so small and delicate, that stick to the linoleum, while all the while death's making noise like wings flapping. Belladonna, I'm helpless. My hands are tied before you. The devil tonight. Black wings spread, the devil's airplane. Come, land on me. Angel crashing, angel tearing. Belladonna, more than life-size. You, like an angel of Poe. You, like his hallucinated pilot. But you, the devil tonight. What makes you want me? Sending sounds, they come and go. A lady laughing, a lady moaning, a lady naked in her bathrobe. Do you want me to want her? Belladonna, Belladonna, more than life-size, raven, the devil tonight. If you want me, come and eat me. Eat me. Come and eat me. Thank you. And our next reader is Bruce Andrews.
Jerome Rothenberg, national treasure, global treasure, cosmic treasure. All right. So I have a 3-minute text I've written of lines from Jerry before I had any contact with him, which was in 1971. And I was 23 years old, in between stints of graduate school in political science, been a poet for a couple of years, submitting poems to magazines, getting published. The key was Jerry had an address because he edited Algeringa, so I got to send him some work in 1971. And as a result, he got me in touch with this guy who was starting a little magazine in Oakland, California, and that was the beginning of so-called language poetry, Ron Silliman, in 1971. A couple years later, he also introduced Charles Bernstein, who was going to be the next reader, to Ron Silliman. But Ron and I had the first correspondence, and that led to things. And I didn't get to meet Jerry till I moved to New York in '75, and we became dear friends, and loved him and Diane, and spent time with them in San Diego, just cherished memories of that. So this is a piece for Jerry. The poet makes a deliberate assault on the minds of his audience. The vehicle of movement is imagination. The condition of movement is freedom. You were trying to dream. I find that I remember things that are better left forgotten. Terror of words. Are words a dance? Treachery of words. We lived for what was not ourselves. Changing words into paper, lying in wait for each other. The world's been crucified long enough. Love each other. Dissolution of your names. Mad dream. Animal. This violence of new preoccupations. One thought, 1,000 movements. Make it counter proposition. I had no patience. My love for you is senseless. Likewise, music. Be open, surprisingly, beyond a narrative. It is better to be on with it. We called it a place by subtraction. Deposit me in your heart. I was firm and substantive. Moistens. Nowhere at ease, nowhere at ease, nowhere at ease. Perhaps it's always those things that can't be really defined that are the most interesting things in any relationship. I believe that everything is possible in poetry. I look for new forms and possibilities, but also for ways of presenting in my own language the oldest possibilities of poetry going back to the primitive and archaic cultures that have been opening up to us over the last 100 years. Pretend to be different things. Give everyone a new name. Laughing together. Words few and far between. To read sounds aloud. Follow your own play principle to wherever it takes you. A star that burns forever in that sky. Melody remains constant. Accounting not only for meaning, but for word distortions, meaningless syllables, music, style of performance, etc. I was taught. I straightened up. He is the subject of a sentimental biography. He knew when he had had enough. Repeat the preceding events with other members of the audience until all have been soaked in blood. One adds numbers. Quote, I have no right to another man's business, and it makes me sick, unquote. Words in the old tongue. There ought to be a book. If someone would ever learn to write with light and burn it in my heart, to unscramble simple sentences, dancers in love with misfortune, the secret was out, all is forgiven, and has no book of its own written in light. All we touch is love, for which reason I deny autobiography. Might have been written through the flesh, praying for joy, moisture below, dreams, and pay for them. Next up, Marty Ehrlich and my historic partner in crime, Charles Bernstein.
invisible worm that flies in the night, in the howling storm, has found joy and his dark secret love. Does thy life destroy?
Saddle sore I came, a Jew among the Indians. What am I doing in this strange place? Mid this pickle, mid strange eyes? Could be in trouble. Could be. He says, a shadow arises from his buckwheat, has a tomahawk in hand, shadow of an axe, inside his right eye, of a fountain pen inside his left. What am I doing here? How was I lost to get here? Am 100 men, 150 different shadows, Jews and Gentiles bring the Lord to the wilderness, he says. This man is me, our grandfathers, and other men of letters, men with letters, carrying the mail, Lithuanian poet express riders, the financially crazed Buffalo Bill, still riding in the lead, avenging the death of Custer. This place is making me crazy. Has all the letters going backwards. When the Bolshevik visited America, he wore a shrimmel. The locals all thought he was a cowboy, maybe from Mexico. A cowboy? No, a cowboy! The vision of our grandfathers. Vision of the Bolshevik in America. The slaves in steerage. What have they seen in common? By what light has their eyes been opened into the stars? I wouldn't know what I was doing here. This place has all the letters going backwards. A reverse time towards wilderness. The wedding. My mind is stuffed with tablecloths and with rings, but my mind is dreaming of Poland, stuffed with Poland, brought in imagination to a black wedding, a naked bridegroom hovering above his naked bride. Mad Poland, how terrible thy Jews at weddings, thy synagogues with camphor smells and almonds, the thermos bottles, thy electric fogs, thy braided apricots and pits, thy underwear alive with roots. Oh, Poland, 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 Poland. How thy bells wrapped in their flowers toll, how they do offer up their tongues to kiss the moon. Old mother, stuck in the sky thyself, an old bell with no tongue, a lost udder. Oh, Poland, thy beer is ever made of rotten bread. Thy silks are linens, merely thy tradesmen dance at where fantastic grooms still dream of bridesmaids, still are screaming past their red mustaches. Poland! We have lain awake in thy soft arms forever. Thy feathers have been balm to us. Thy pillows capture us like sickly wounds and guard us. Let us sail through thy fierce weddings, Poland. Let us tread thy markets, where thy sausages grow ripe and full. Let us bite thy peppercorns. Let thy oxen's dung be sugar to thy dying juice. Oh, Poland, oh, sweet, resourceful, restless Poland. Oh, Poland of the saints unbuttoned. Poland repeating endlessly the triple names of Mary. Poland, 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 Poland. Have we not tired of thee, Poland? No, for thy cheeses shall never tire us, nor the honey of thy goats. Thy broods shall work ferociously upon their looming brides, shall bring forth executioners, shall stand like kings inside thy doorways, shall throw their arms around thy vigils. Poland, and begin to cry!
Devin, Brajo Waldman will accompany me. We're going to do a little medley, and I just want to say, waking up, or whoever slept last night, but waking up thinking about Jerry and various extraordinary qualities, I thought of this Buddhist vow where you say, Dharma gates are endless, or Dharma gates, poetry gates are endless. I vow to open every one of them. And really, that's what Jerry was doing for all of us. I'm incredibly indebted to his encouragement around investigating some of these things that he also loved. Maria Sabina, who was encouraging the early Buddhist nuns' poems, the Therigatha that I was working on, and other studies of that nature. So those continue, and I'll have a little bit at the end of the medley with a piece called Ekajati. But from Jerry, I also thought, what's relevant right now, in a way, and there's, where's that book? With the visit to this is kind of intense. It's at the Hotel Monaco. We'll start with that, and then there's this other bit from technicians out of, anyways, about these fire beings that are children with blood. Wanted to reference that for Gaza, and then maybe a little bit of the Tibetan poem. We also use that as a ritual often in Europa. I bring greetings from friends in Europa, Jerome, and we're very happy to hear this was going on. He was a great advisor to the program. He took on, I don't know, he was a great advisor, just say that, and a presence, and a great teacher, of course. We worked with his incredible tentacular mind. It was raining when we got to Rome, the miles from Auschwitz, bringing back the memories of what had happened there. Traveling with our son, we'd made reservations for a single suite at the Hotel Marmer. But when we pulled in, the hotel could only come up with 2 separate rooms. After a while, though, the desk clerk said that they had found a suite for us that was free. An elderly bellhop carried our bags up the central flight of stairs, threw the big doors open, put our bags down on the floor, and asked me with a little smile, "And do you know who slept here?" Then he answered his own question, "Hitler." And he made a speech from the balcony, after which he turned and closed the doors behind him, leaving us to think again about our fate and theirs. In the room where Hitler slept, dreams didn't come, but sounds broke from the walls and cracked, then cracked under us, crackled down the stair past our feet, the dance beginning. While over our heads the lights would flicker, 1, 2, 3, 4, brought to life, we stepped out on his balcony and hailed the crowds, hard faces, 4, 2, 3, 1, theirs like ours, our fingers flat of our lips, looking like hairs, 2 fingers held above the lip, his lip, bunched up, touched by his tongue. The rain falls upside down from iron boxes. The dead outside the ring surround on us. Cousins fallen, bird-eyed, where the rain like tiny knives opens the wounds. Children in rain, the red-faced killers, reach up to the man. The victims without faces, broken underfoot. 4, 1, 3, 2. I hadn't been there, where the lines of gymnasts march to the sounds of open flesh. For them, his face is golden, old as time, and echoing the cry of what can never be reborn. Birth of the fire god. From the burning babe, a pretty babe in air, aglow and glittering, his skin split from the heat, his tears a flood, but useless, cannot quench the flames, but feeds them. Newly born, burns like babe, like lamb on spit. He cries, but no one hears or feels the heat he feels, his breast a furnace, fueled by red-hot thorns that make him cry out. Blameless love, oh sighs and fires, smoke and ashes, shame and scorn, the flames of angry justice, mercy's hungry smile. A babe dissolved like molten iron, casts himself into a pit, while others fall and vanish, bathed with blood. I offer flowers, I sow seeds, I plant flowers, I assemble flowers, I pack flowers, I pick different flowers, I remove flowers, I seek flowers like flowers, I arrange flowers, I thread a flower, I string flowers. I make flowers. I make a flower necklace, a flower garland, a paper of flowers, a bouquet, a flower shield, hand thread them, I string them, I provide them with leaves, make a pendant of them. I smell something, I smell them. I cause one to smell something, I cause to smell. I offer flowers to one, I offer him flowers. I provide him with flowers. I provide one with flowers. I provide with a flower necklace. I provide with a flower necklace. I place a garland on one. I provide one with flowers. I make flowers, or I give them to one that someone will observe. Or I might merely continue to give one flower. I continue to place them in one's hand. I continue to offer them to one's hands. Or I provide one with a necklace. Or I provide one with a garland of flowers. Bury the skull of a yak. Bury the skull of a black bitch. Hide the skulls of a dog and a pig under a child's bed. Or bury a weasel's skull there. Or a puppy's or a piglet's set out. Or bury the skulls of a fox, a badger, and a marmot in a cemetery. Bury the heads of a fish and of an otter. The head of a wolf, a horse, or a yak at the border of an enemy's house. Hide the skulls of a man, a dog, and a pig underneath a stupa. Place the skull of a goat or a sheep halfway up the mountain. Bury the skull of a monkey, a parrot, or a bat where people come to hold a meeting. Bury the skulls of a hybrid yak and of a mule somewhere in the country. Bury the skulls of a lynx and a wolf in a pit someone has dug in the center of a city. Bury the skull of a yak. Bury the skull of a yak. This is a little out of Isaiah working into ekajati. Isaiah 7:19, remnant of the land. And it shall come to pass in that day, and it shall come that day in passing and strange, unexpected, never told like this, with arrows and with bows. And it shall come hither, because all the land shall become briars and thorns, and you will be there with a blunt axe. Associate yourselves, O ye people, and ye shall be broken in pieces. And give ear, all ye of yore, guard yourselves, all countries, guard yourself, as ye shall be broken in pieces. Stumble and fall and be broken and be taken, remnant of the land. Shulamite's words, my abolition is spirit, new abolitionists spit. Name is an ointment poured forth, our bed is green. Oh, Shulamite, with your bee skin, my beloved, is unto me as a cluster of campfire in the vineyard of mortality. Ekajati. A Dharmapala described as a wrathful Mamo or Dakini, who is especially important protectress of the Buddhist Ati teachings. Dark blue with a single top knot, one eye, one fang, and one breast. She wears a skull crown and bone ornaments with a tiger skin round her waist. Enveloped in clouds, she holds a heart in her right hand and emanates wolves from the fingers of her left hand. The mantra of summoning is inside. Rippling, a paranormal world sounds like sound of one tithing. Struggling a voice be made pure sound, high and clear. Eka, jati, lone string, the low sound of the gut string. All animals sound here. No dark complaints, but sounds from gutter of human realm. Be expelled here, cleanse us here. Eka, jati, one in extremis sounds warning. On obstacles, out, out. Hecate's curse turns you wild. How diagrammed wind across years of ear. How do you score this alembic of mind, earth, and earthly beauty in its Anacene smile and wisdom? Ekajati! Before you come out, you're startled on the stage, in the spotlight, your naked mind. A series of taut strings, series of spinal chords in rhythm. All the organelles and collusions stack up here. Dream of the infant in the hurricane. What is she singing? Infant praise song for a little life. Listen for a little life imprinted on all the tracks. Many years, crenellated folds of the brain. A leg lifts to join the antistrophe inside the figure of chorus. Nape of night, ekajati, weapon at waist. Treasure of woods, the bog, the charnel ground, skin, oh, toad, eye of bat, wing of the talismanic night wind, oh, eka, jati. For Jerry. And next is Ed Sanders. Thank you, Devin.
Ah, how I miss Jerry Rothenberg. It was so fulfilling and satisfying over the decades, being assured that he was still actively writing brilliant books and sending out good vibes over the world. Ah, Jerry, I recall how you sent me Poland 1931 in early 1975, and it soared through my mind. And the notes and letters you sent me over the years, one of them offering to send the big Jewish book, if I hadn't already gotten it. Oh, I miss Jerry. I miss Jerry Rothenberg and his wonderful books and sun-beaming life. One great thing about Jerry Rothenberg, he was always a joy to know. He had a friendly vision, and his hand was always outstretched. If you saw him at a distance, it made you want to smile. If you saw him at a distance, you'd walk many a mile. You'd want to gain his friendship in the book of poetry. Yeah, you'd want to gain his friendship in the book of poetry.
short person. I knew Jerry before I met him. I was at Columbia in the late 60s, getting an MFA and writing poetry, such a ridiculous thing. I carried 2 books with me, always. A translation of Tagore's Gitanjali with an introduction by Yeats, and this book, Technicians of the Sacred. We called it our Bible. To learn to do things here is bitterness. Look how my book opens naturally to this page. Song of the Dead, relating the origin of bitterness, a Nashi text, West China. In addition to this text, I was fascinated by the material in the back of the book, the brilliant way that Jerry connected the texts in the anthology to methods of contemporary poetry. From Southwest China, we are suddenly thinking about Ginsberg's poem Mescaline. He saw his shadow reflected on the water, his own shadow that he saw reflected. He was old, and then he knew it. 10 years later, when I was researching my dissertation on performance in contemporary American poetry, which includes a chapter on Jerry, I had a chance to go to San Diego to meet him in person. He was generous with his time, reading rough drafts, recommending sources and other poet performers. He introduced me to David Anton, Eleanor Anton, Jackson McLough, Armand Schwerner, all very close friends, and many others. Watching Jerry perform, as I did at the Festival of Performance What's Cooking in San Diego and at many other places, I was inspired and encouraged to continue my own poetic exploration of performance and language. Jerry used to joke that he always would look out into an audience and he expected to see me there recording his performance, and I was often there doing just that. Beneath the shingle roof house, there is bitterness. Who does not die? Jerry Rothenberg was my mentor and my friend, and he gave me this Nashi text. Let us retain all the good qualities of the dead, his ability to count and record, and his ability to sing. We will follow the crane to his clouds. We'll go with the tiger to his high mountain, and with our ancestor into the sky. And the next speaker is Steve Clay.
It's an honor to be here tonight to share this experience with all of you. To pay tribute to our beloved friend, collaborator, and revered elder, Jerome Rothenberg. Jerry was a poet, first and foremost, and he had a lifelong engagement with the idea of the book and the small press, starting with his own Hawkswell press in 1958, and in 1959, the magazine Poems from the Floating World. He wrote, "The main activity of my poetics has involved acts of presentation, assemblage, performance, and translation. I found early along that magazines were a natural vehicle for me, and that the magazines I edited inevitably expanded to anthology. New Wilderness Letter was founded in 1978. Jerry offered the following statement in the first number. He wrote, The editor, a poet by inclination and practice, recognizes poesis in all arts and sciences, all human thoughts and acts directed towards such ends, the participation in what the surrealist master Andre Breton called a sacred action, or what Gary Snyder defined as the real work, to uncover the inner structure and actual boundaries of the mind. Issue number 11, 1982, co-edited with David Gus, the book's spiritual instrument was of special interest to me. He wrote, "There was a recognition that any exploration of language that took us into what I came to think of as areas of deep culture ever found was at the same time a descent into the domain of deep mind, or if I can say so without blurring the issue, into the domain of spirit as such." It was with my belated discovery of that issue of New Wilderness Letter that I began to work with Jerry on the first of what would become some 14 collaborations, some with artists here tonight, including Cecilia Vicuña and Susan B. He wrote, "There is a primal book and there is a primal voice, and it is the task of our poetry and art to recover it in our minds and in the world at large." He wrote, "The book is as old as fire and water, and thought made in the mouth, as it is also in the hands and lungs and with the inner body. If that was our condition at the beginning, it will also in the end." I'll end with a very short poem, which was the dedication in Technations of the Sacred, although I don't think it was in the first edition. I think it was in California edition. I love my world. I love my time. I love my growing children. I love my old people. I love my ceremonies. Next is Nicole Peyrafitte.
I'm going to snake my way from Southern California to my native Pyrenees. Epigraph of the Serpent and the Fire. The great snake, all knowledge, all the arts were inside her. When the fire reached her, she exploded. All knowledge gushed from her, was scattered everywhere. Kumeyaay myth of creation. The Kumeyaay are indigenous peoples who live at the northern California, at the northern border of Baja California in Mexico, and the southern border of California in the US, including San Diego, where I met Pierre and the Rothenbergs in 1989. While Pierre and I lived in San Diego, we met at least once a week for meals and drinks, while Jerry and Pierre met almost every day for work on the anthology. And they also visited us in the Pyrenees at least twice, maybe even 3 times. In all of his compilations, whether with Pierre, Jeffrey, Javier, George, Jerry's mission was to gather, juxtapose, and create an open-ended experiment he called omnipoetics. Here, a quote from the introduction. "The interconnectedness of the universe or the infinity of time as a contemporary attempt to project a new, a primal, equal, complex consciousness of the whole." Then on page 7, in the section called Preludium, America Before America, comes the entry, American Earthworks, the Great Serpent Mound. He had already included it in America, a Prophecy in 1973 with George. The entry displays a photo of the monumental prehistoric effigy mound dating around 1000 BC in Peebles, Ohio. And Pierre and I had a very important visit there in 2019. I had several conversations with Jerry about it. I'll let you read the commentary in the book, but the Serpent Mound is an earthwork but its shape and cosmic significance resonates with a Pyrenean bas-relief known as the Snake Woman, or Woman of Hope. With my short incantation of the women of the Hymnadeo, I wrote in Occitan Gascon. But I am so grateful to both and Diane, who significantly shaped my work, whether it was incorporating Pyrenean prehistoric and antediluvian representation, cooking, Occitan language, and Pierre and my omnipoetics projects. And now, to enhance our infinite interconnectedness, a quote from Nathalie Diaz that Jerry quotes in the intro of The Serpent and the Fire. Because Jerry and Diane, who is maybe watching from San Diego, will always be ferrymen and ferrywomen of knowledge, poetry, and friendship wherever they are in the universe. The quote, "Learning and speaking one's native language is an emotional and political act. Each time a poet brings a native language into the white space of the page, into the white space of the academies and institutions of poetry, it is an emotional and political act." Ho, ho, ho! Hymna de ho! Ho, ho, ho! Hymna de ho! Hymna al Serp, hymna antediluviana, hymna pirenenca, ho, ho, ho! Hymna de ho! Ramboluda, hymna de pecat, Ramboluda, hymna de luxuria, la enclavada als capitels romanics, ho, 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 hymna de ho, Peyrafitte, Peyra de moviment, Peyra de car, Peyra viva, Thank you, Jerry and Diane. Jake Marmer.
I have three little things to share. The first one is a little assemblage that I was going to give to Jerry on his birthday, but we ran out of time. It's a study of a certain word, a certain image that appears all around his writings in different shapes and sizes and different angles, and I thought I would assemble them together for breadth and pleasure of experience. It's called Maestro's Balls. Wait, well, who's that? He's channeling. Don't want my balls cut off for no one's ceremonies. Not the blue balls of the rabbi, not the blue balls from someone's endless testimony, not even the balls of dung or pig's balls, shrunken balls, balls hairy like a lamb's, handsome pair of balls, behemoth balls cast across mountains, demons bulging balls, eyes also bulging. Hugo Ball in a witch doctor hat, just one, but paired with Jesus sucking on a ball of fat. Ogun's drain balls, how many does their God drain? Similar question regarding the balls of fire flying across the great Hechalot, Kabbalistic palaces. Picasso had balls of fire too. Balls in a Panchiko parlor, those are the actual pinball balls. Otter balls chewed off in a dream by a bee whose own pair thus remained intact. I love the story about how Jerry's father-in-law dragged him into a Judaica store where he was not enthusiastic to be, but he found a book called The Spice of Torah, Gematria, which was the beginning of his Gematria poems. And I contend that no Kabbalist or mystic has known Gematria without having seen Jerry yoke together words that are semantically connected, but are connected through mystical numerological connections. He stood there like a conductor between those two words. And so this is a gematria. This is the spice of Torah. And this is a little gematria of Jerry's name. The rebellion, before, late, mechanisms, his legs, and bless you, and bless him, the righteous, mutiny, pity you, plastered. Never seen him plastered, seen him drink, but not plastered. Okay. And in the mirror, and foot, and will be mentioned for purification, fateful, multiple, affright, reign, and they will remember. Thank you. I was just thinking about something Charles pointed out. Jerry was the ultimately hyphenated poet, critic, anthologist, editor, anthropologist, performer, teacher, translator. And in my own home, I have an additional set of hyphenations. My kids have been calling Jerry Papa's friend, Jerry the great poet. And I love that they grew up knowing him and having met him, and they remember stories, meeting him and Diane, and remember their jokes and cigarettes and booze and the masks all over the house, and that when we read one of his poems at home, it becomes an occasion to remember these stories. And I suppose this is what we mean when we say, may his memory be forever a blessing. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for Pierre for inviting me. And I just want to say that it's always been meaningful and important for me to meet Jerry and, of course, Diane and Matthew. And what Jerry did through his anthologies and his poetry for me was show me possibilities that I wouldn't have imagined on my own. And I thank George and Pierre and Steve for their collaborations with Jerry. So at first I was going to read an early poem I wrote that was, I think, influenced by Jerry, but given what happened last night, I felt it wouldn't be, I didn't feel like it would work. Instead, I've recovered some words here from a lost library. These are the first and last words. Leaped ashore. I guess so. We would get wrong, rendering intelligible plurality and cardinal numbers like a hangover, like the nonstop factory of knowing whether a person that knows how, as if the body were being emptied of air. The way they do. I've had lucid dreams, one hand and a brush in another. The key ideas emerge depending on the availability of a moral base. My audacity, let you know. The bands that can were sacred harp singers, the finest varieties of, I cannot pronounce it right. Building up this machine, I'm trapped on a larger train. Thanks very much. Jeffrey Robinson.
I met Jerry in 2003 at Anne Waldman's Naropa, where he and Pierre were giving a panel on anthologies, Millennium. And I was in the audience, and I asked him, as a professional romanticist, I asked him, would it be possible to do an anthology from, such an anthology from an earlier period rather than the present or the near present? And we talked a little bit about it then, but a few months later, I wrote to him and asked him again if I could consult with him on a project like this. He said, why don't you come out and visit us in Encinitas? So I spent 4 days with Jerry and Diane in Encinitas. After one day, he said, what if we did the 3rd volume of poems for the millennium? And I thought it and thought that might be a fabulous idea. I was kind of overwhelmed by it. He said, of course, we can't go forward with this without consulting that other great shade in this room, David Anton. So we went over to David Anton's house, and David gave us the imprimatur that apparently was necessary to go forward. And the result was Poems from the Millennium after about 5 years. But that's not what I'm going to talk about now. Upon my receipt of the note from Matthew that his father had passed away, a poetic fragment popped into my head from that 1,000-year compendium of poems, the Greek anthology. A great poet has just died, and all poetry dies too. Today, still haunted by the ancient assertion, I wonder why it seems so apt for memorializing Jerry. While the endurance of a poet's work is the honorific of most epitaphs, this one pitches our attention away from the poet towards a world without poetry, in which we imagine all poems careening into vacancy, a sudden generalized deficit in poetic speech, an impoverishment, a collapse of networks that ordinarily ensure poetry's sought-for construction of coherence and consolation. Of course, poetry doesn't end with a great poet's death, as is obvious certainly in the case of Jerry. Jerry would have understood and welcomed an insight hidden in this epitaph upon the death of a great poet. One kind of poetry, weighty, visible, monumental, simply consolatory and familiar, vanishes to be replaced by poetry that is bewilderingly unfamiliar. Indeed, for example, Laura Riding Jackson or Jacques Roubaud calls this kind of poetry nothing, in which linguistic and formal turbulence maps cosmic turbulence. Seems very relevant to today. Paul Celan charts that nothing in a breathtaking leap. There are songs to sing on the other side of mankind. Thank you, Pierre Joris. Analogously, contra Adorno's assertion about the death of poetry after Auschwitz, Jerry often insisted that only poetry exists. He said of his total project that poetry post-Auschwitz demanded legitimate acts of othering, a phrase clarified in his 1987 trip to Poland, in particular Treblinka. In its empty field, the absence of the living seemed to create a vacuum in which the dead, the Dybbuk's who had died before their time, were free to speak. It wasn't the first time that I thought of poetry as the language of the dead, but never so powerfully as now. The poetry that I first began to hear at Treblinka are the clearest message that I have ever gotten about why I write poetry. Jerry's friend in the 60s and 70s, Edmond Jabez, said in the Book of Questions that post-Auschwitz poetry requires wounded words, the language of the dead, on the other side of mankind. Jerry heard and translated words recast by trauma in his Khurban poem, Das Geschrei, the scream. The word as prelude to the scream, it enters through the asshole, circles along the gut into the throat, and breaks out in a cry, a scream. It is his scream that shakes me, weeping in Auschwitzim, and that allows the poem to come. Oh, it happened without my knowing it. He appeared without my knowing it. Jerry's wounded words were nonetheless, in the Homeric formula, winged, From these ghostly screams to songs and chants of Seneca and Navajo, to the long Western poetic adventure of experimental composition, rising to his new anthology of poetry of the Americas. Thus, in his own work, Jerry himself has taught us that in a moment when all poetry has died, we can hear the poetry of the dead. With his death, I would hope that Jerry would encourage a new generation of poets writing out of their immediate concerns, but crucially, says, under the aspect of eternity. Like Alexander Pope's poet, who heaven derived their light, Jerry, I believe, envisioned that as extravagant as it is, although tonight I think would prove this to be kind of obvious almost, that he himself would be translated to a heavenly sphere of poetic conversation. He once wrote, "Those who have lived a life of poetry will die and meet the poets." In limbo, sings Dante, the dead poets speak together, ragionati insieme, a splendid school assembled. In Jerry's phrase, a paradise of poets. Praise given to the recently deceased Frederick Jameson applies to Jerome Rothenberg. It's the very rare contemporary person who can regard his life and death from the point of view of future collectivity, which is how I read a 2016 photo that I took at a cemetery by Robert Burns's birthplace in Alloway, Scotland, where Jerry seems to gesture to beckoning spirits with his hands.
I read a very few poems here from a sequence that I composed to honor Jerry Rothenberg's 70th birthday. And they were first read, in fact, at a celebration here at St. Mark's on that occasion. The composition method follows a détourné +7 method. Each poem is based on word material, each 7th word of the first 15 poems in Jerome's first and latest books. The arrangement is my own, as are excisions, additions, subtractions, and divisions. Variation number 1. Where sun still black, fish smells us in the long city, at large in the wound of our curving vagina. The wind crickets knew you, the stolen cavity, wrapped heads, spitting poison gills, drew blood, a sad white heart, fully there, searching paradise. Variation number 2. And a cry, neighbors, there, but he comes, my fish comes, emptied the death of light. They crushed the lie, a fish comes, cracks the whole, hands disrupted by a spider grew out of air, moon, blood, we roof, we cold, what scraping, where dead soldiers looked was dark, my bed, my icicle. Variation number 3, old legs and fish, terraces behind mountains, how to be mountains. He thinks it's all up, I acts like overnight vase. Your 2 strides, something, lilies, cigars, asters, single out graves, no, granite movement flowers, but bronze flowers hidden in stones. Thank you. And Matthew to finish us out for the evening.
Thank you to everyone who attended and participated tonight. This little participatory poem that my father would frequently end his readings with, and I thought it would be good as a sort of benediction at the end of the evening. So, like, it's a bit of a call and response thing. So let's give it a try. Old Man Beaver's Blessing Song. All I want's a good 5-cent cigar. Hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho. All I want's a good 5-cent cigar. Hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho. All I want's a good 5-cent cigar. Hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho. All I want's a good 5-cent cigar. Hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho. All I want's a good 5-cent cigar. Hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho. All I want a good 5-cent cigar. Hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho, hee hee ho ho. Old Man Beaver's Blessing Song.